sit back in your seats, get something to eat, and watch this movie. Don't let the kiddies see it, because, well, we'll let you hear the beginning first. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Left of the Projector. I am your host, Evan, back again with another film discussion from the left. I'm happy to announce that you can now sign up and be a paid subscriber to the show directly from Spotify, so you can just pop on there and support the show. Also, if you would be so kind as to smash that ratings button on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you're listening to this show right now. As always, you can follow the show on TikTok and Instagram at Left of the Projector Pod. Enjoy the show. All right, we will jump into the conversation this week on the 2019 film Knives Out, and joining me to discuss it, we have Amanda, Al, and Dawson. Thank you all for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Well, I don't remember whether you had recommended this movie, Amanda. I had seen it before already, but I think it was given that they just released a sequel that's completely unrelated to the movie, with the exception of Daniel Craig's character, Benoit Blanc. But I don't know, did you recall, when you had seen it before, it having this sort of very structure or, kind of a hierarchical kind of structure about it because of the way sort of the family, is set up. So just as a quick recap, the movie is basically about a family who's sort of the patriarch of the family, Harlan, is a mystery writer, and he has a bunch of children and grandchildren that are constantly, at odds for his money, his inheritance, their inheritance. And so Benoit Blanc is brought in once he is found dead. So that's kind of the layout of the movie. But yeah, anyone who wants to kind of give their, initial impressions or anything like that.
Right off the bat, this is Al. I noticed that it's a film about archetypes. So each of the characters within the film represents a distinct caricature of a person in the realm of in the political scope.
And social.
Yeah, and the social scope as well. There's people who take up the role as the rebel. There's people that take up the role as the caregiver, the ruler, the creator. And I think that because of that, it shows how the privilege of class can be, I guess, like a distinct quality in every sort of character within the world. You can be any sort of character with privilege, with class superiority, I guess, with some sort of class domination within your particular archetype.
Yeah. I think Evan, actually, you mentioned that before, how there is like a hierarchy within like the ones that are like more the beneficiaries and the ones that consider themselves more of the self-made people in the family. So there's like a hierarchy within those like subgroups of the family as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have all of the people who are his children all kind of make themselves out. Specifically, I think Linda, who's played by Jamie Lee Curtis, makes herself out as being the sort of self-made. She created her own company, and later you find out, I think, that her father gave her like $1 million or some large sum of money to be the seed money for her supposed rags to riches story, which is, for really all of them, with the exception of Marta, who is sort of the caregiver nurse for Harlan. Everyone really is just, has their tentacles in Harlan for money.
About Linda, one thing that's really interesting too is that not only does she consider herself self-made, she considers like Joni and Walt to both be leeches off of the family, as if they somehow are doing less than she is, even though, again, she received $1 million loan. Walt just manages a company. He fundamentally does the exact same thing she does.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. She does refer to them as that. And Walt kind of has this sense that he's doing something great by being this, his publishing company, when really he's just, I don't know. I mean, obviously you have to do a little work, I guess, to get things started, but it seems like it was well underway before Walt got involved.
Yeah, it seems like the constant theme throughout those characters is they're unwittingly benefiting from nepotism.
Yeah.
But like and also I want to point out too, like Marta is kind of like, they're like, it's kind of like, I don't want to say like pet, but they are like, like throughout the film they're like, we'll take care of you, Marta. Or they like, Meg is like super defensive of her. She's the more liberal Marxist college school character, or whatever they want to say she's going to. I wish that university existed. But yeah, and so she's kind of like their, I guess,
pet project.
Their pet project, or like their way of like justifying to themselves that they are still like down to earth or something. I don't know. It's an interesting relationship.
Well, I feel like they one of the notes I put down sort of at the beginning when they sort of have her when she's around is that they're fine with her and treating her respectfully when she's no threat except for like literally just the help, the person who, gives her father their medicine and, kind of befriends him, because none of them actually want to be his friend. They just want to take from him. So she's not a threat to them. So it doesn't matter, what she's really doing. They can pretend that she's some kind of equal. But then later we see, the knives come out as I'll use the title.
Yeah, I think they're all dishonest with each other they're dishonest in how they interact with one another. And they're also dishonest in the way they interact with Harlan and the family as well. Like one thing that really stuck out to me is like Marta really being the only honest person in both her interpersonal interactions and in her relation to Harlan. And that's kind of potentiated by the fact that, she's forced to be honest because she gets violently ill if she even tries to tell a lie.
Which is such a, I was just talking about this with my partner, which we had seen Knives Out before, and how that sort of little piece in there kind of creates a, like almost like a fail safe. In these kinds of like murder mystery types of things, you don't usually have that little piece where you can actually tell, it's like the tell for, a poker player or whatever that gives her away, that makes her that honest person, like you're saying.
It's funny you should mention that because, and this is a spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen the film yet.
Oh, that's fine. Spoilers are cool.
But at the end, the climax of the film, she does lie,
and then she wins.
She withholds her limitation for the sake of deceiving Ransom. And it's interesting because everybody uses her, I guess, like weakness as a way to kind of manipulate her throughout the film. They and Ransom specifically does that, and I think it's really interesting that that's sort of a commentary on how the ruling class thinks they have the working class figured out.
Oh,
yeah. They have them mapped out as far as their limitations go, but they don't understand that they can transcend their limitations.
Complexities, yeah.
Yeah, like the scene where he, buys her the meal, and I think he buys her beans or something, and knowing that she can't lie, or that's coming out the other way. So yeah, no, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah, and as far as like all the family members go, well, Ransom is like my favorite character, even though he's the biggest shithead of them all. But like, he's the only one that doesn't seem like he's a kiss ass to his grandfather, and like kind of like doesn't really care what people think of him, whereas everyone else in the family does in a way. Like they want the outside, especially the detectives, which are the outside perspective, like that, yeah, they are good people, that they are hardworking. Ransom's like, yeah, like he doesn't care about anything. You can see the way that he dresses, like his sweater. That sweater is like so gross. It was like kind of yellow and like tethered on the collar. So he didn't really like, you could tell he doesn't really care what anyone thinks about him.
Well, and we were talking about the symbolism of what he was wearing.
Yeah.
So it's a white collared shirt that's tattered on the neck.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like maybe a symbolism for the white collared worker. You know, there's a deceptive quality to the white collared class, I guess. And perhaps he's sort of a representation of that.
Yeah, and then you see he has a BMW and a very nice house, so it's not like he's not living
Squalor.
Yeah, he's not living a frugal lifestyle. Yeah, I mean, since you mentioned Ransom, it's kind of be interesting to kind of go through some of the, I feel like all the characters are I mean, they don't have like a very complex nature to them. They're all kind of, some of them are a bit surface level, but I think they're interesting. And I find the kind of the dynamic between some of the siblings, especially the politics that they kind of pretend to. I think you mentioned, Al's, kind of how they, symbolize, different kind of components of society. You have Linda's husband is Richard Drysdale. I can't remember the actor. I wrote down almost all the actors' names. I'm blanking on the actor who plays him.
Johnson.
Yes, and
Don
so
Johnson.
Exactly, yeah. And so he's sort of the, kind of Republican, hard nosed kind of character, whereas sort of the other side, you have Joni is sort of the kind of seen as the quote unquote liberal of the group, which is still, again, none of them are liberal really at all. They can just kind of pretend. For their little, drunken arguments. And then you have their kids, both on both sides, is Meg, who you mentioned is sort of like the, she's in like liberal arts college, I guess, presumably. And then Walt and Donna's child is this, I think his name is Jacob. And they kind of refer to him as like an alt-right troll, which I think is kind of a funny little nugget there, as, this kid who's just kind of causing trouble online.
And they also, the detective calls him the Nazi, the
Nazi boy,
the little Nazi boy in the bathroom.
Yeah.
I think that's so Jacob is he's Walt's kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I think it's interesting too, because Walt seems kind of like kind of a libertarian, like a right-leaning libertarian. And then his spawn is an alt-right Nazi. And I think that's kind of like, it kind of symbolizes like this sort of gateway drug into that type of ideology,
Walt is the alt-right pipeline.
Yeah. Like, sort of diminishing the value of other people until it becomes just so self-important that it becomes some sort of Nazi ideology.
And he is the most aggressive towards Marta and bringing up her mother's undocumented status. He is the most aggressive towards her.
That's true. I think his wife Donna also kind of, I remember at the party, I don't remember exactly what she said, but I feel like she sort of is agreeing with all the things that Richard is saying about sort of being a, they think they're talking about, they try to bring her in on the conversation about immigration, and they always are constantly getting the country she's from wrong. They all don't give a shit about her.
No.
Oh yeah. And so then when Ransom goes off about at the end about his ancestral home that was purchased in the 80s. He's talking about, obviously a family that had been there maybe 4 generations tops on this landmass, talking to someone who's very likely, at least representationally supposed to be of a native sort of bloodline to this continent.
Marta,
yeah, implying that how dare this person, this imposter, take my ancestral home. And it's yeah, it's just a slap in the face. It's the slap in the face that this country does to people of Native descent all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Another thing I found interesting about Jacob is that, despite Walt and Richard generally agreeing on like immigration, and again, like kind of mocking, not Marta, but like, other Latin American immigrants, Richard at one point, like, also identifies Jacob as like being, quote, literally a Nazi, as if he's trying to distance himself from that, even though their politics really are not that far off. It's an optics thing for Richard.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be identified as that, even though everything he says is basically, like you said, is just the same thing with, different language, really.
They come here the right way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that whole thing was, yeah. The politics this came out in 2019, so given the time frame, it, and probably written a couple years before, it kind of felt very much like they were kind of, channeling. I don't want to, bring in Trump so much, but I feel like they were using that as like a springboard for, I guess it's a pretty common conservative talking point. So yeah, it has nothing to do with that, really.
Yeah, I think more so than any other time in the past, that particular like 2016, 2015 era of just American politics and where they were going, and just the fractured qualities and the polarization of people. It spawned like all these archetypes that these people represent. And I mean, further, like the sequel, I'm not going to get too into that, but it seems to kind of carry that same theme.
And we did talk about Ransom some. I think one of the things that is interesting, maybe going back towards kind of slowly kind of sketching some of the movie, is you kind of get a sense of Marta's sort of character and sort of her home life. You see all these families are, Richard and Linda presumably are very wealthy, big company. Joni doesn't seem to have any money. She's kind of just living off of Harlan. Walter seems to be fairly wealthy, running the publishing company. And then they show Marta's home life, where she has her sister and her mom, who we find out is undocumented, living, a very modest lifestyle, and, seemingly like a regular apartment complex, like most people would be living, that are, the average working class person. And so they really showed kind of the different lifestyles of the two, especially when they, show the home from above, along the river. I think it's like along the Hudson River in upstate New York, or I think that's where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that it also kind of talks about how at one point when Harlan's, thinks he's dying, he talks about how long it would take for the ambulance to get out to their countryside estate,
right?
That's so remote and away from all the peasants, essentially.
Yeah, right.
And go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. You can continue.
And I mean, that's kind of also sort of a deliberate idea as well, that I think Rian Johnson.
Ron.
Yeah.
No, the director.
Oh, Rian Johnson.
Rian Johnson, yeah. He did the Last Jedi. Which I'll do. But I think he was trying to kind of show that, like, you remove yourself from society so much, there's no one to keep you safe. There's, you might think that all of your wealth is going to protect you, but if you withdraw from people so much that you think you're so superior to them, you're basically kind of slitting your own throat.
Yeah, you're on your own.
Yeah. Also, and actually, one thing I just remembered this is kind of unrelated, but I think that Linda mentions that they're in real estate, and she was a realtor initially, is kind of how she supposedly got her start. So she's kind of just a landlord, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't ever really say explicitly that, but that's mean something like that.
house flipping is the way for people to become wealthy on their own, and I'm doing finger quotations that you can't see.
Yeah.
It's extremely exploitive. We talk about it all the time in our home. We see a lot of people from our punk rock community that
Real estate agents.
that become that, because it is the way to make it, but like
It's
at
also,
what cost?
yeah,
You know?
it's profiting from necessities, commodifying our necessities. Especially when they have the punk rock background. It's like, better. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think that Linda really, she doesn't really, in that political discussion, she doesn't kind of give her where she lands, but I think it's probably obvious where she does land in that conversation. So she doesn't, this doesn't matter. She doesn't care about the people and what they need. And the only character that they kind of try and make, I think you might have mentioned, Al, is that Meg, so Joni's daughter, who's in sort of that liberal arts type college setting. She tries to befriend, or it seems like she's closer in age to Marta, so she kind of befriends her, and they try and make her a sympathetic character, but then sort of later on in the film, they're all kind of watching her as she, places a specific call to her to kind of gather intel for the family. So at the end of the day, she's looking out for herself.
Well, they all know that without their means, they would cease to exist in the world that they exist in. That their entire paradigm would change on an instant, which it has. And I think that in a sense is kind of the heartless quality of Harlan, is that his family really wouldn't be able to bounce back on their feet. They would die in the cold, like an abandoned child in the woods. They are incapable of helping themselves.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, I mean the one character the only characters we haven't really mentioned or talked about is sort of the detective who's played by Daniel Craig, Benoit Blanc, who's sort of the I don't want to call him the comic relief, but he's the the Southern draw talking detective that's brought in to solve the mystery, as we find out later, hired by Ransom, Chris Evans' character. And then we have the two police officers, and I think there's a couple maybe side components to it. And I had found this thing online, an article discussing this movie and the classes, and they kind of leave sort of Marta as that working class character, the cops and Benoit Blanc are sort of middle class, and then the rest kind of falls into that sort of corporate class area, and then at the top you kind of have Harlan, and then at the end of the movie, all of that kind of switches around with Marta becoming sort of this upper class person, and the others, I guess, technically still have their companies, with the exception of, I guess Linda still has her company. She's the only one that really kind of doesn't lose anything out of all of this. I guess maybe her husband, who's cheating on her.
I think that it's interesting that they gave Benoit Blanc a Southern accent, because especially in the United States, a lot of people generalize people with Southern accents as being less intelligent for some reason.
Yeah.
And so it kind of makes him a fly on the wall to them. They constantly make fun of his accent, like Foghorn Leghorn Kentucky accent or something, and it makes them look down on him for it when
they underestimate him.
Exactly.
Yeah, they don't see him as a threat in that sense. So that's actually perfect. Makes me wonder if his accent's real then.
Yeah. Well, in the sequel, he continues the accent, and I think that, I mean, we won't talk about the next movie. I mean, maybe not everyone's seen it, but that kind of plays in the same way, as he's kind of an underestimated character too.
Since we're on the topic of Blanc, I think something that is kind of interesting to me is that in the beginning of the film, they for the most part seem to be just irritated by him. Like, it's like, why are you even here? Like, it was a suicide. And that kind of slowly fading away, and then realizing that he is a threat because sorry, not that he's a threat, but that Marta's going to take everything. Then they suddenly care that their dad might have been murdered.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Well, I mean, to all of those, to the family, any person that's sort of not on their level or in their circle is, either a friend or a foe. And Marta was a friend initially and, became the foe. So it's whatever, you can do for me to help me, what benefit will you give to me? And if you're a threat, then we will, do something. And it's funny because I feel like they probably all, without, if Ransom had succeeded in framing Marta and it had gone that way, and then they all got their inheritance back, and then they found out about that, they probably would just be like, well, it's fine. We did what we had to do to keep, everything in our family. But they don't seem to be that angry at him, even at the end of the movie.
Yeah, as he's walking to the police car, they're just kind of seem annoyed more than anything.
Right. I mean, he
Or
didn't
they're-
technically kill him, but they did. He did.
Yeah. Well, he had every intention to.
Well, yeah, right. He wanted someone to kill. Right. He didn't want to get his hands dirty, so he had to have sort of someone else do it, and then he realized there needed to be more steps as the plan failed.
Right. Which was interesting because I say that's interesting so much. Sorry. So Harlan himself actually explains that Ransom is the most like him. And it's true, he creates these convoluted plans that eventually shoot them in the foot. Harlan didn't need to die, but he did because he wouldn't listen to Marta. And Ransom didn't need to go along with this huge elaborate plot. It's all of these convoluted plots were the downfall of both of those characters.
Yeah. I mean, that's like any good sort of, as this is literally a mystery, but like you read a mystery novel, the person ends up being caught because they have too many elaborate things all happening at once.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The archetype of just sort of like the mystery genre sort of, I feel like it's sort of flipped around a little bit, because it's presents itself like one of his books, but it ends up being, sort of the class dynamics, I think, turns the movie into something different. Probably not the same kind of book that he was writing. He probably didn't have class dynamics in his own books. Presumably. I don't know. They don't really say, except for the one cop who's like always geeking out about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a pretty interesting character as well. He represents sort of a jester or like some sort of fanboy for that kind of ties everyone together. He's a fan of Blanc. He's a fan of Harlan. And so he kind of ties those characters together, but in this sort of like doughy-eyed fanboy sort of persona that makes him taken less seriously by the family as well. And then the main police officer, Lakeith,
or that's his detective, or I don't remember his name, but
I got the IMDb.
I think it's Elliot, maybe
Lieutenant Elliot. Yes.
Yeah.
He kind of has this sort of third person perspective. He's not as engaged as Blanc, even though Blanc is sort of in the background at the beginning. He still serves this sort of I guess like overseer sort of presence throughout the film, but not as direct as Blanc, even though Blanc is sort of that person at the beginning.
It's interesting when there's movies with like he's not really a private detective. He's more, I mean, I guess he kind of is Blanc. Because, typically, the way they kind of portray police in this movie is kind of somewhat incompetent, but sort of also just kind of there to go through the motions. They're not really doing anything. And Blanc is there to kind of actually do work, but only because he's hired. He's not doing this out of, the kindness of his heart. He's also getting paid.
He's getting paid a lot. That's the thing. He also mentions there's like a wad of cash, so he has his motive.
Yeah, and it's the fact that Ransom brought him into the storyline, kind of underestimating what he would expose. Like, he essentially incriminated his employer, you know?
Exactly. He didn't he didn't think he was as good as he underestimated him, I guess is really the easiest way to say it.
And he basically sacked his own boss.
Yeah. Well, and like that's a good murder mystery though. You know, it's always who you least suspect. You know, Scooby Doo, you pull the mask off. It's always the rich white guy. But
yes, usually. Yeah, the I don't know why this note just is kind of like going through my notes along the movie, and one thing I made this little completely random note was that a few times in the movie they show Marta checking her email, and you know, one point she's like, "Oh, I forgot to check my email," which is kind of a funny line, but she's like checking her phone, and you notice that the phone is cracked, and I'm sure that was intentional, given that, you know, she's working as a nurse, working class, can't afford to get a new phone. They're all, you know, probably have, you know, multiple phones, and, you know, doing like, you know, Ransom's got burner phones to do his shady business. So it's, you know, the little things I think were well done in this movie. I'm sure there's lots of other Easter eggs I didn't notice.
That car in particular, I had that exact car Marta has. It's a 2011 Hyundai Accent. It has like roll down windows, and yeah, it's just all around a very horrible car. So when I saw that every time I see that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes me really recognize the position she's in.
Yeah, the part where she's trying to like run away from the cops, and he's Ransom saying like to floor it, and she is, and it's going 60. Yeah, it's like it just doesn't go any faster. Yeah, I remember the car. Yeah, it's very, you know, you very much see the disparity between them, you know, throughout the movie. And I think the other thing that they also constantly mention about her, you know, they all constantly make mistakenly say where she's from, like Ecuador, or I don't know which other countries they mention, but they also often will say how she's a hard worker early in the movie, and then later, when they realize that she's been named as the, you know, the heir to the fortune, she's no longer that. She's now, you know, she's stealing from them. She's taking
or sleeping with them.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. So they characterize her as someone who had to have sex to get what she wanted. There's no way she could have accessed this Latina is a seductress, and she slept her way to the top.
Yeah, Jacob screams, "You're having sex with my grandfather."
Yeah, and it's a pretty common, speaking as a Latino man, it's pretty common to have ideas put upon the, you know, the variety of genders within my ethnicity, particularly among women. They have that generalization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they just assume that there's no way she could have maybe just been nice to their father and he liked her because she's actually a good person. And that's kind of his justification too. And I think that's something that's never really discussed in the movie much at all. It's, you know, we can kind of get your thoughts on it. Is so Harlan makes the decision to give the money to her. He's friends with her over whatever amount of years that she's been his nurse. And he's tired of his kids always kind of cheating him out of money and taking things and not being good people, and decides to give all the money to her. What does that say about him, you know, as a, you know, this wealthy upper class, you know, I wouldn't say maybe he's a capitalist. I don't think he's quite that. I mean, maybe. What would bring you to do that other than to stick it to your family?
They're a product of his creation, and I think he has some deep-seated regret for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think he has a lot of pride for his work, but not so much pride in what his work has given him and given his family and what it has done to them. I think that there's a certain amount of divisiveness in what he did, because surely he knows his family enough to know how they would take it out on Marta.
Vicious.
You know, it's not like they're strange to him and how they would react. He's very aware of how they would react.
Yeah.
So in a sense, he signed Marta up to deal with that. And, you know, whether he thought that that was a fun joke or not, or it was still like something he didn't fully understand, is that he didn't seem shocked that his medicine potentially got switched up and that he was intentionally being drugged to die. It seemed like he understood that his family was capable of killing him. Someone in his family. So if he understands that his family is capable of such a thing, that they're that selfish, what would that assumption have with the outcome of Marta getting all of this inheritance that they feel entitled to? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, I like generally agree. I also think that the way in which he died kind of makes it harder, because like he talked with Ransom about that Marta was already getting it, right? If he had the time to like explain that to everyone else before he died, I don't know, not to like defend Harlan, but like I think if he had the ability to explain that to everyone, it would have been easier for Marta to deal with the pushback from the family.
True.
Yeah, and he probably also, even your Harlan's, he might have expected Ransom to take that information and share it with his family, whereas he instead immediately hatches a plan to what he's going to do to prevent this from happening, to, you know, implicate her in his father's murder. You know, he's willing to basically kill his dad to get what's his, and if everyone else gets some, you know, so be it. But that didn't work out that way. He just kept that information to himself. So I don't know. Yeah, Harlan definitely didn't consider that. But I think you said, Al, that do you think that Harlan understood after the mistake happened, or supposed mistake, what actually happened, that Ransom had engineered this?
He seemed to have understood that somebody had intentionally done it, because he used the words, so if someone were to switch this medicine up, this would have this effect on me in this amount of time. You know, he's playing it back to himself exactly how he thinks things are being played out. Almost like he's writing a story about a murder.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's why he's starting to concoct how he's going to defend Marta.
Yeah, and he knew that Marta was a good nurse. That's like mentioned also by the detective later on, when she picks up the bottles and she knows exactly which bottle it is without looking at the label. She can tell the slight difference in the viscosity of it. It's a hard word. And so he knows that she's a good nurse. So yeah, he probably put that together pretty quickly in that moment, it seems.
Yeah, I didn't consider that prospect. In my mind, I was just thinking he was using his sort of mystery, you know, his mind of being able to create, you know, they kind of allude to the fact that he thinks of his plots just kind of out of thin air. He just kind of comes up with them. So he was kind of creating it, but maybe not realizing it actually was what they had done, not just a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing how angry Ransom was earlier, and like you said, I think, Al, is that they were a product of him, maybe Ransom the most of all of them. So he almost knew what could happen in telling this information to Ransom intentionally. Like he gave him this information. It's almost like he was setting up a murder mystery type of situation himself by, you know, putting that domino down. Not intentionally, but just for fun, I could say maybe it was.
Well, the way that Harlan was kind of cleaning house during his birthday party, did seem like there was a certain deliberateness to what he was doing. You know, he decided to cut people off that had never been cut off. He decided to tell that to Harlan.
The note about his about Linda's husband cheating on him.
Exactly. Like there was a lot of I guess like sort of purging that he did, almost like somebody who understands that their end is near, you know, like
Yeah.
I guess perhaps being 85, it's something worth considering, but why choose that evening, and why, you know, why not be so shocked, I guess, when, you know, when he found out that he was possibly going to die from getting an overdose of morphine.
And he had just amended his will the week before. So he had just
Exactly.
made this decision. He amends his will. He starts doing all these things. I mean, whether or not he's intending to create this, chaotic situation, you were saying before, is he had to know what this would mean for Marta and kind of his whole family going after her once it was revealed. But I guess he couldn't have anticipated his death being so soon. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a leap to say that I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I kind of view Harlan almost as a class traitor, except because he's never been in Marta's shoes. He couldn't have foreseen like how his family would react to her. And yeah, I don't think he was like anticipating for all this to happen either. I think it just makes sense that like he wanted to cut people off like as soon as he changed the will, maybe thinking he'd live a few more years and then they would kind of be able to simmer down before it's revealed that Marta's actually getting everything.
Yeah, or maybe this was almost like he was doing this as a way to, in the same way that the adage of like, oh, his family has to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and actually get along without his handouts. They could do something on their own, and then he would like, all right, you guys earned this now you can have my money later on. It was sort of like he's testing them maybe.
There was a foreword that he added to the will though.
That's right. It was like a whole note, right?
Yeah, it was kind of this will be hard for you, but understand
It's best.
this is what's best. And so there was a certain amount of, I guess, withholding of the information. But it did seem like because of that note, there was sort of a deliberate meaning, like an intention of surprise, I guess.
Yeah.
Just reflecting on it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like he treated his own life like the same way he treated his work of writing novels. Life was a game to him. I mean, hard to say. He wrote the note for his daughter Linda on the paper then he thought was empty, or Richard thought the paper was empty, and then she heated the back, and then all the ink comes out. It's like a gag from like Who Framed Roger Rabbit with the reappearing ink or something. It's it's like it's all very toying with people.
I did like how they showed that that's how they communicated when she was younger. Like it was sort of they did a really good job at showing how these devices throughout the film connected with these individuals. The ink with Linda, she understood how that worked, like it was something that they did that was theirs.
Which makes me think that they were definitely like the closest.
Yeah.
Like she, like at first when they're interviewing her in the beginning, the detectives are interviewing her. She's like, "Oh, we had this secret way of communicating." You're like, "Okay, whatever." Like, I'm sure you do, but it turns out they did. And I love that little detail.
Yeah.
And then what about was it Nana, Harlan's mom?
Oh yeah.
What a fantastic character. She didn't say pretty much anything. She was like, "Again? Are you back again, Ransom?" She's so crucial to the whole unraveling of everything. And I really love how the detective Blanc like really does not underestimate her.
No, they want to put her in a home or something. They're worried about her, and yet she's very, maybe not as quick witted as someone who's younger, but was together in some sense.
A lot of underestimated characters.
Yeah.
Did they ever say her age outright in the film?
I don't think so, but I mean, if
She-
Harlan was 85, I mean,
She gotta be like
102?
105, yeah, or 102. Or
I don't know. I was thinking like 17. I'm giving, I don't know, when she had Harlan.
Different times.
I don't know. At least 100. Where we have to go there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, which means
what's that?
Well, she pre-existed the wealth and likely went through the Great Depression
And a couple wars.
and a couple of wars.
Yeah.
So she probably understood a lot more than other people as well throughout the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's probably, I mean, presumably Harlan probably grew up poor. I mean, I guess they don't really say, but, given that he seems to have gained his wealth from his writing, it probably would be safe to assume he didn't grow up wealthy. I don't know. Maybe that's not a.
Yeah.
And she's the one character that needed the least from Harlan. Like she's just kicking in her chair.
Yeah, there's the
dip.
funny line too where I think they say like, oh, whether she has to go to bed or whether she's eaten, and she had they mentioned that she had eaten the entire spread of bagels or something. I don't know what the food was, but they say something like that. I thought it was
the whole salmon plate. The salmon.
Yeah.
salmon plate. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and Walt, the way he talks to her is like, Nana, food. Do you want to eat the food
For dinner.
for dinner? Like,
Yeah, all of them are very patronizing of everyone, really, right? Anyone who's below
Yeah.
them, they all are very patronizing of Marta, even though they act friendly to her, because, I mean, really, they only care about her because they have to assume the health of the, the person who holds all of their money.
Mm-hmm. Until she becomes the one that holds the money.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, Dawson, you had mentioned some of the kind of the corrupting interpersonal kind of things that happen. I don't know if you wanted to mention some of that here too. I don't know if maybe we've kind of talked a little bit about it.
I'll go back over kind of and expand on it. So I don't know, I feel like this family in general could be pretty normal, or at least normal in sense of how the average American middle class family is viewed if they weren't so wealthy, right? Again, everyone was totally fine that Harlan died. No one really got sad until they were almost kind of happy. They pretended to be a little bit sad, but until they found out Marta was in the will, no one felt anger or true sadness. It even suggests that they talk so fondly of Harlan, but it's again, his death they don't really care about. They were more so just waiting for him to die so that they could officially have that wealth transferred to them. Another thing that's kind of interesting to me, and we kind of touched on this already, but Meg and Marta kind of being friends along with Fran, and they do kind of demonstrate they have some mutual trust, and then Meg betrays her because her ability to go to college is put on the line, is what Joni tells her, and then she betrays her. And I don't know, back to kind of politics, that reminded me a lot of kind of more progressive liberals historically being willing to align with fascists if it's in their best interest.
And the other thing too is, I mean, you mentioned that if this were a more middle class family, I mean, you see the political dynamics play out. You see people, seeing their family over the holidays. You might have a conservative uncle or, cousin, and then there would be arguing, I feel like, similar things around the table, but they're not arguing about, who's getting the $1 million in their will. That's the deciding thing, which you mentioned is sort of what separates this family.
Yeah, like I work at a law firm and I scan in some files about estate planning when families die and then they're trying to distribute the farmland. And I mean, obviously the murders maybe a step further than the average family, but even families that seem to get along, maybe they have some disagreements, like they go at each other's throats when millions of dollars are on the line.
Yeah, when your well-being is up for grabs, or I mean, like for ransom, they don't really, I mean, presumably, I guess his parents were paying for his way, Linda and Richard. They don't really say. It doesn't really seem like maybe Harlan was paying for his lifestyle too. I just kind of took him as sort of kind of like a trust fund kid. He wasn't doing anything. He was just getting money to live his lifestyle or his whatever it is he was doing. And, once that threat is cut off, well, I guess it makes more sense he was getting money from Harlan because, his mom still had this company, whether or not Harlan was around or not. But Harlan dying and not giving him his inheritance would leave him with nothing. So it seemed like he was getting, the silver spoon from Harlan.
Something I just thought of too is that, so the idea throughout the film as well is that everybody is, the bootstraps, get where you get through hard work type thing. And even though Marta still works hard, it's not through her hard work that she gets the wealth. It's still a gift,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a commentary on how wealth works. It's a lot of people think that, the American dream is you work so hard that you get wealthy enough to invest and then you become wealthier. But it's sort of a pipe dream now. And I think that Harlan's operating off of an old school mentality in that regard. And the fact that, Marta is the hardest working person in the film, if it wasn't for Harlan's gift, she would still be in squalor.
She'd probably be worse off because she wouldn't have him employing her. She was privately employed by him.
Exactly.
Right. I'm sure she got paid more than she would if, she worked at a hospital with, hard hours and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this it made me think of a couple episodes ago. I did Forrest Gump, talking about not a movie I really actually like, mostly ragging on it. But part of that movie is him constantly, he ends up with massive wealth, mostly just constantly failing upward. He accidentally comes across all these things that kind of lead to him accumulating a massive amount of wealth. Nothing really through his own real hard work or skill. And, you kind of celebrate that. And that's kind of the, really is sort of the, in some sense, the American dream of mostly luck, where you were born, who you were employed by, when, so on and so forth. And for Marta, she also got, lucked into this, and presumably a lawyer now who can help her mother, gain, legal status. And I don't know, I guess her sister probably already is, would be a legal citizen too. So I don't know. I just was thinking about that too.
Yeah, that's kind of like the essentially like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, like that whole thing of running into somebody that thinks that you're special. Like that's always like kind of the story of like children's tales, from live drama to cartoons. It's like, King Arthur, he pulls the stone, the sword out of the stone because he's special. And like, you kind of like grow up hoping that will happen to you. I don't know. I felt that way. Like, kind of offshoot. So, Nicolas Cage was filming a movie here in Portland. It's called Pig. It's very good. And we're like, oh, if we run into him, it'd be so cool if he like gave us a bag of money, because he's like really bad with money. And we're like, that's going to be our come up is Nicolas Cage and his terrible ways of how deal with money. But it's always like that's always kind of like our little joke, like, oh, this old person's gonna like us enough, and it's gonna be like, here, have my 4-bedroom house, because we'll never be able to buy house.
Yeah, and that comes from a place of love towards Nicolas Cage.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah. in case he's listening.
I mean, maybe. Are you out there, Nick Cage? But we can do a movie that you're in soon. Well, it's also like the, what was I going to say about that is, I don't know. I don't remember my thought. I guess you're talking about sort of getting gifted. I think, I know what it was. It sort of reminds me of people who, and I'm not comparing the joke you're making or your situation into this at all. Because if I don't say that first, it's going to sound like I was, because it's not a good comparison. I think of like people who sort of like envy, very wealthy people like Elon Musk, and sort of envy him in a sense like, oh, if we, kiss his ass and we're nice to him, he'll, bring us along for his, like along on the ride. I think there is this sense of, at the core of some of those people realize that they have no way up, and their only way to do that is through some, magic wand or, major gift kind of situation. And so it's funny, those people will deny what I just said, but I think that's kind of at the core of the truth.
The simping for the billionaires.
Yeah, I mean, at the core is like they don't have, most of those people are probably, working class, middle class, and that would be their way to becoming wealthy. They envy that kind of person, unfortunately, and so that's their, I don't know, their ticket, their golden ticket.
Their come up, yeah.
I think in our case we just thought we were as cool as a Mongolian T-Rex skull. So we figured maybe he would invest in a couple of cool kids.
Nicolas Cage. Yeah.
Because he bought a T-Rex skull, which was one of his major purchases.
Oh, Nicolas Cage is far cooler than Elon Musk. I'll just put that there too.
Yeah. You had to make sure everyone knew.
I mean, Nicolas Cage. I mean, you can say what you will about maybe some of the movies he's been in, but he does a lot of movies, and presumably probably works pretty hard to be in like 7 movies per year.
Yeah, the guy doesn't stop.
No, I think
brings energy to them too.
I 100% agree though. But yeah, our situation's different. We're joking.
Yeah, right. I know. I hope I didn't.
No, not at all. No. Al just really wanted to talk about the T-Rex skull.
I wish I had a T-Rex skull. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
He returned it to Mongolia, which was a noble thing.
He bought it and then returned it to where it was from. I see. Okay.
Yeah, that's much better than the entire continent of North America and England.
Yeah.
Shout out to England for their British museum with nothing British in it.
Or like Indiana Jones, a little questionable.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, like the simping for billionaire thing, like it's the ass kissing thing, and that in the family, bringing it back to the family, that's pretty much all that they had to offer Harlan was admiration and ass kissing, because they were just producing stuff for themselves, but they weren't really bringing anything to the family. At the end of the day,
Right. Yeah, I mean the whole family. And that's the thing too. I mean, we mentioned the kids, like the grandkids of Harlan, Meg and Jacob. What is their, what do their parents or sort of see for them as, a future? Ransom's is kind of already kind of determined. He's the sort of this kind of trust fund kid, where Meg is like at least going to school to educate herself. I don't know. I'm assuming Ransom probably went to, I don't know, like Dartmouth or something, wherever Harlan went, I guess. And then Jacob, I guess he must be younger. He must be like a high school kid, because they don't really mention him in school. So I don't know. Yeah, he's going to be, work for, InfoWars or something.
Oh God.
Or I don't know. Maybe he'll start his, I guess, maybe he could use, if he had gotten some inheritance, he could have started his own alt-right newspaper or something like that.
Or he can like intern at the Epoch Times or something.
Oh God. Oh man. I was just reading something about that. Kind of like going down the rabbit hole on it. It's just a whole.
Yeah, it's a cult. It's pretty tough.
But I don't know. Did anyone have any, last bits about the movie we didn't cover? I feel like I kind of went through most of the notes that I had. I think we talked a lot about the class aspect and the politics. But yeah, any other things we didn't mention? Whether it's even if it's just like a little thing we did, something you noticed in the movie too. Funny things.
Oh, I mean, like the last scene, of course, is quite epic. The placement is perfect. The family's all at a lower level, and she's up on this upper level, kind of like the royalty, And then the mug says, "My house, my rules," and then I can't see what else it says, but it's something like that. And I just, chef's.
Yeah.
Another thing about that mug, that's this. I went back as soon as I saw that part, and that's the exact same mug that Fran was about to serve to Harlan with his morning coffee when she found him dead too.
I didn't notice that's wow.
That's cool.
That's really funny. And actually, one thing I had this open before, but I didn't look at it. So that line where Jacob says, "You had sex with my grandpa, you dirty," he says, "You dirty anchor baby," was the other part of that. That was completely improvised. He just said that randomly.
Oh.
That was a big, what's her name? The just atrocious Republican commentator.
Which
one?
Well, she's blonde.
Oh,
Lorraine?
Tommy Lauren.
No, so there's a
she's blonde.
there's a gradient sort of like descent into, and she's at the very end of this. Tommy Loren is at the beginning, and then they progressively become like
Kellyanne Conway.
Kellyanne Conway is the next one, and then this next one.
Oh, it gets worse.
Anyway, she really used the term anchor babies during the Trump 2016 campaign, and I remember thinking like, shit, am I an anchor baby?
Oh yeah,
and I just felt personally attacked by that whole election, I guess. Like, but it's brilliant that kid used that in that context.
Yeah,
because he knows nothing about her as a person.
They don't even know where she's from.
He presumes that she's an.
Oh, and FYI, the actress that plays Marta, she's Cuban, by the way. If anybody wants to know, she's Cuban Spaniard. She lived in Cuba until she was 18, and then moved to Spain. So
where is she actually meant to be from in the movie? Because I say a bunch of different countries.
I looked it up. They said Paraguay, Uruguay, and Brazil, and there's no one knows.
Oh, so they don't actually say. So she could just have been from Cuba for all we know, because that's where she's from.
Maybe Dawson. Did you look it up?
No, they did say Ecuador earlier in the movie too, but that was by Walt, so I had no clue.
Okay, I got the name now
of the commentator.
Yeah, Ann Coulter.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So there's Tommy Loren, and then the decay happens. Kellyanne Conway, the decay, it's like the Emperor Palpatine, eventually becomes Ann Coulter.
Way to throw the Star Wars in there.
Yep.
Yeah. Just her soul just slowly becomes a Sith Lord.
Yeah, she's eventually just like, strike me down with your anger.
Oh yeah, I was looking through some of these other trivia things aren't quite as. I just like that line though was completely improvised. But I guess so. It says I think that you don't hear. At least I didn't hear the anchor baby part, because I think a bunch of the characters are yelling all at the same time, so it's hard to hear it. There's something else about that end scene too that I was going to mention, where you kind of show her at the top and they're all kind of walking away, but I don't remember what it was. I mean, I think it's, well, I was going to also say is that's when Linda just, reads the secret note that her father had left for her, to basically, I think she punches Richard too, because I think they show him a minute later with a black eye. Maybe I made that up. I don't know. Either way, she finds out, and so he's now also cut out of presumably this company, because I think she had a prenup they mentioned, so he's not getting anything. He gets nothing. Linda's really the only one out of the whole group that I feel like kind of stays within her class or her, you know, her status in some sense. All the rest of them are pretty much fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Joni, she's like got her skincare line. It's totally like an MLM. Like she gives me like Instagram influencer MLM vibes. Like it's not just skincare. It's a life experience. And blah blah blah. I'm like, ooh, sell that capitalism harder. Like
I love the line when they're talking when Benoit Blanc comes in and she says, "I read a tweet about an article about you," which I just thought was a great line.
Yes.
It's like she didn't read the article, and then I think that Linda has to like name dropping, like, "I read your profile in whatever magazine, New Yorker or whatever it was."
Mm-hmm. She actually read it. Yeah, that was like right after Jody too. So yeah, that's like it's kind of like how a lot of discourse goes in the United States is like, oh, I read a commentary on on the commentary or whatever summary, you know,
digested into 200 characters.
Everyone gets their information via some elaborate game of telephone, and it's usually just some bastardized version of the original.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's really just Jacob the son and like, on some some big Twitter account, just pumping out, nonsense, which his then I guess his aunt then reads. Or some, I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that kid's gonna cause trouble, I know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's got the tools, Twitter, good old Twitter.
And now every ounce of presumption that he has about immigrant people is like completely validated in his mind.
Oh yeah, because he had this experience, and all you have to have is one anecdotal experience or whatever, and then that's all you need. It's called confirmation bias.
Yeah, it's the catalyst for his life story now,
Mm-hmm. He knew a girl from Paraguay that took his family.
But yeah, anyone have any last closing thoughts, and we can send it off.
I got nothing.
I guess that means the holster is dry or something. Bucket, barrel, I don't know. I think I messed up that metaphor.
It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking about this with you folks.
Yeah. Thank you so much all for Dawson, Amanda, and Al for joining me to talk about Knives Out. And anyone who wants to listen to the podcast can check it out on any platform where you can find podcasts. And have a good one, everyone.